Hello everyone, my name is Margus Pedaste. I am Professor of Education and Technology at the University of Tartu. And today I would like to talk to you about contemporary learning approach. First, it is important to identify the problem. And I would follow the problem-solving model developed by Bransford and Stein a long time ago, which identifies 5 main phases of problem solving: identification, defining, exploring, action, and looking back. First, the problem to be solved is related to the needs, beliefs, and practices of teachers, and namely, we see that these do not overlap enough. We could say that we have now a wind of changes in society, changes in labor market, and the rapid development of technology set also new goals for learning and instruction. For example, we see a lot of multiculturalism, globalization, immigration. We see that we have a lot of new knowledge. The knowledge of the humankind is exponentially growing. We have a lot of big data and the possibilities for learning analytics based on this data. But we also see that due to the development of technology, some jobs disappear, and it is said that maybe 1/3 jobs even do not exist now for the kids who are studying right now. So what are the aims for the learning and instruction in this changed environment? We see that the knowledge space should be much more dynamic. We see that skills are maybe less dynamic, but we should focus much more on 21st century skills, or we could also say transferable skills. And even more important are values and attitudes that are more stable compared to knowledge and skills. For example, openness, culture of learning, culture of collaboration. What we see from data, for example, from OECD TALIS data, we see that teachers' beliefs are very contemporary in this sense, because they see that they should facilitate students' own inquiry. They should allow students to think on solutions to practical problems. They should guide students towards reasoning and to solve problems. However, what we also see that the practices according to TALIS are quite different, so that the most common activities the students carry out in their classroom, or the teachers will carry out in the classroom, is presenting a summary of recently learned content, checking students' exercise book, and only then come links to problem solving and some practical activities. So in order to solve this problem, we run a literature review to find what is innovative teaching and learning. And we can see that innovative is, we would say, constructive perspective, where learning is an active, goal-oriented, cumulative, and constructive activity. We see that learning is a social process and self-directed process. And when we link those ideas, then we can see that learning is a social, contextualized, self-directed, reflected construction process. We found an interesting study from our Finnish colleagues, Sari Lindblom-Mylänen and Liisa Postarev, who studied a bit more than 70 university teachers to understand what are the contemporary characteristics of the learning process. And they differentiated 2 types of activities. And one of them was called more contemporary, where the teachers and learners focused more on learning. They defined different categories, 10 different categories in their study, and further they grouped those 10 into 4 different larger categories: teaching process, learning environment, conception of learning, and pedagogical development. And they described several terms that are characteristic for the learning process when the focus is really on learning. For example, in the planning process, students need to be thinking on their own needs. Their prior knowledge should be taken into account. The plans should be made together with the teachers, not only teachers and students, not only by the teachers. So then the teaching should be suited to different audiences, so that we cannot teach the so-called average student. Assessment should be on understanding how deep is students' understanding. Teachers' role is more encouraging students. Students' role is to be an active participant in the learning process. Interactions should be quite equal between students and teachers. The atmosphere should be safe to ask questions, and so on, so on. Based on this review and understanding the project, we started to develop a model that will link different learning goals, objectives, and methods for learning and instruction. And we ended up in that kind of model that was developed together with Estonia Ministry of Education and Research and our colleagues from the University of Tartu, Tallinn University, and many other institutions. In this model, we saw that actually we should specify why do we need some changes in learning and instruction. And we saw that the changes come from the labor market changes, social changes, technological development, and political choices. And all these set some new broader goals for learning and instruction, namely self-fulfillment, openness, lifelong learning. But we saw that these broader goals are a bit too broad to measure and to develop in detail in particular learning activity. And that's why we finally defined 5 a bit more concrete learning objectives that are measurable and that could be developed in everyday practice. So that we have to still focus on subject knowledge and skills, but in addition to that, we have to focus on many transferable skills like learning skills, collaborative skills, self-directedness, and we also have to support subjective well-being, which is a prerequisite of learning process where students are really motivated to learn. And in order to achieve those objectives, we saw that the school culture is the one that needs to be changed. And it starts from the leadership and organization's school life. And in addition, we have to think on the learning approach applied in a school, in teacher training, teacher learning, professional development that supports acquiring the new ideas, and later on, physical, mental, and social learning environment should be adapted to the new needs. This brings us to the discussion to make conclusions and look back, to think on how to proceed and who should take one or other action. What we know and where to go, actually. We see now that the new approach to learning contributes to ensure self-fulfillment, openness, and lifelong learning. We know that the instructional process in schools nowadays is too often not innovative. We know that something about subject-specific learning outcomes, but we need to evaluate also learning skills, collaborative skills, self-regulation, and subjective well-being. And finally, we should focus on empirical knowledge about learning and instruction, how different, let's say, interventions have effect on those different objectives defined in the model we just introduced. And finally, there are several references you could look for in order to understand more about our ideas. As you see, those references are all 15 or more years old, so that we can say that this contemporary learning approach is not contemporary per se, but we can see that actually what is new is to put all those ideas together, and what is actually missing is how to implement them in a complex environment in practice. So, thank you. My name is Margus Pedaste, Tartu in Estonia. I'm happy to contribute with you, collaborate with you in further projects as well. Thank you.